India's independence in 1947 was the result of decades of struggle. It began in the late 19th century when Indians started organizing to protest British colonial rule. The Indian National Congress was formed in 1885, making the start of a united political effort. But wait, how India got colonized by the European powers? Actually, it all started in the 15th century. The Portuguese started their expedition from the city of Lisbon in the 15th century. They traveled along the west coast of Africa and ultimately reached Indian subcontinent, where they landed in the city of Calicut. Vasco da Gama was one of the first Europeans to reach India by sea. He sailed from Lisbon with a fleet of 4 ships and about 170 crew members. The fleet sailed down the west coast of Africa, rounding the Cape of Good Hope. After a 23-day voyage across the Indian Ocean, Vasco da Gama and his fleet sighted the Ghats mountains and reached the coast of India at Calicut. Following Vasco da Gama's initial voyage in 1497 to 1499, the Portuguese established a permanent presence in India, starting with the appointment of Viceroy in 1505. This marked the beginning of the Portuguese state in India, which lasted until 1961. The Portuguese built their first fort in India in Cochin, present-day Kochi, Kerala, in 1503. This fort, named Fort Emmanuel, was built with the permission of local ruler, the Raja of Cochin. This was followed by a second Portuguese fort built in India in Kannur, Kerala. It was constructed in 1505 by Francisco de Almeida, the first Portuguese viceroy of India, and is known as Fort St. Angelo. Fort St. Angelo is a popular tourist destination due to its rich history, strategic location, and impressive views. It offers visitors a chance to explore a well-preserved fort with a long and varied past, including the use by the Portuguese, Dutch, and the British. The Portuguese conquest of Goa occurred when the governor Afonso de Albuquerque captured the city in 1510 from the Sultanate of Bijapur. By taking Goa, Afonso de Albuquerque became the second European to conquer land in India since Alexander. Unlike the Portuguese military garrisons established in allied lands such as Cochin and Kannur, Goa included for the first time a large body of native non-Portuguese inhabitants for the Portuguese crown to rule. Portuguese influence in India collapsed after centuries of power as rival European navies, changing politics, and Indian resistance eroded their dominance. Internal corruption and weak governors led to decline the influence of Portuguese in India, while harsh religious policies alienated Indian society. Local kingdoms and powerful forces like the Marathas captured Portuguese land, shrinking their empire. The Dutch and British navies challenged Portuguese ships, blockading ports and seizing territory. The early 1600s, for almost 100 years, the Portuguese ruled the spice routes like kings. In 1605, Dutch ships appeared off the Coromandel coast, docking at Masulipatam. Their mission: break the Portuguese monopoly and grab a share of India's spice wealth. They docked first at Masulipatam, then Pulicat, Cochin, Surat. Each stop not just a port but a factory, a fortified trading post for silk, spices, and saltpetre. They set up their factory in Bengal too, on the banks of Hooghly River, which gave them important openings for Europe and Asian trade. But eventually, they lost their influence too. The Battle of Calicut was fought between the Indian Kingdom of Travancore and the Dutch East India Company. King Marthanda Varma's forces defeated the Dutch East India Company. The Dutch never recovered from the defeat and no longer posed a large colonial threat to India. Another similar battle was the Battle of Chinsura. This was between the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company. The British victory was so complete that the Dutch troops sent only 16 Europeans successfully reached Chinsura. In the wake of their victory, Clive overthrew Mir Jafar and replaced with his son-in-law Mir Qasim Ali Khan. For over 2 centuries, the French held on to small pockets of India, and they didn't let go easily. They established their first factory at Surat and soon after built trading posts in places like Pondicherry, Chandenagore, and Mahe. These factories weren't just warehouses, they were fortified hubs of commerce, diplomacy, and sometimes conflict. What began as simple trading factories grew into colonies that would last nearly 3 centuries, leaving behind an unmistakable French imprint on Indian coastline. The enclaves were Pondicherry, Karikal, Yanun on the Coromandel coast, Mahe on the Malabar coast, and Chandenagore in Bengal. The French also possessed several lodges. These were tiny subsidiary trading stations inside other towns. But after 1816, the British denied all French claims to. But this wasn't the worst part. The worst part was yet to come.
India's Army of Liberation, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, declared in 1944.
We are conscious that the spoil of India is going to be.
November 1612, the quiet waters near the Swali coast, Gujarat, are about to witness history. The British East India Company's small fleet, led by Captain Thomas Best, confronts the mighty Portuguese armada. Cannons roar, masts splinter, and the sea turns into a battlefield. Against overwhelming odds, the English prevail, a victory that breaks through Portuguese dominance and secures the company's first stronghold in India. On June 23, 1757, on the banks of Bhagirathi River near Plassey, it prepared to take its first great step onto the political stage. Facing Robert Clive's small disciplined force was Siraj-ul-Dowla, the Nawab of Bengal, commanding an army of nearly 50,000. The heart of Nawab's army, betrayal, was at work. Several key generals, already bought by British promises, refused to fight. By afternoon, Siraj's forces collapsed and Bengal was in company's hand. August 12, 1765, a new chapter in India's history was written. Just 8 years after the Battle of Plassey, the East India Company had once again defeated the Mughal-backed forces, this time at the Battle of Buxar. Now the Mughal Empire Shah Alam II, weakened and desperate, was forced to sign the Treaty of Allahabad. Under its term, the company was granted Diwani, the right to collect revenue over Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. At dawn of July 10, 1806, the garrison town of Vellore exploded in revolt. Indian sepoys, angered by new uniforms that defied their religious customs, stormed the fort, killing over 100 British soldiers. The uprising was swiftly crushed, but it exposed a dangerous truth. 50 years later, those same grievances would return with a far greater force in the uprising of 1857. In 1857, India rose in fierce rebellion. What began with sepoys soon swept across the land. Mangal Singh of Aligarh led his men against British posts, inspiring many to join the fight. Though crushed, the uprising shook the East India Company to its core. In its wake, the British Crown took direct control of India, ending company rule but planting the seeds of growing national awakening. The Crown rule, or the British Raj, brought railways and reforms, but also heavy taxes, land seizures, and racial discrimination. Life for millions became harsher under imperial rule. Yet across the subcontinent, brave voices rose. From early revolutionaries to the leaders of the freedom struggle, their courage lit a fire that would burn for decades.
That the spoil of India is going to be the last theatre of war in this part of the world. Friends, I do not know how many of us who are going to participate in the coming battles.
Talking about how Indian freedom fighters fought against the colonial power, it would take an hour or two. But their struggles didn't go waste at all. On 15th August 1947, India got its very own independence.